Welcome to Thinking Through the Darkness, a Lore by Spec podcast, with me, your host, Spec. This is a podcast where we talk through all of the pre-production that goes into making the theories that you see on the Lore by Spec channel and its associated channels. Let's get the shilling out of the way first. If you haven't gone and subscribed and liked and commented on the videos on Lore by Spec on the YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that now. That's one of the best ways that you can support me. This podcast is also available anywhere that you can find podcasts. So if you are listening, if you could like the podcast and maybe leave a little review, that does wonders for the algorithm on the podcast side, which really helps. And if you want to help support this podcast, this is the only one that currently doesn't use free tools. And since it's a paid thing, if you have the means to contribute to this, the link for this is in my description for my Ko-Fi. This helps me keep the light on and pay for all of the things that go into making this podcast a quality project. Today's podcast is going to be something I think I nearly always say that it's going to be something a little different, but we're going to be taking it from the comments today because someone left a comment on the She Already Knew, the Maleficent theory that nobody's talking about, which got crazy reception, by the way. So thank you all so much for turning out for that. It was something like 3K views in like 2 days or something like that. So wild. Absolutely wild behavior. So thank you all very much for that. But there's a lot of interesting comments that came with that. But one of the ones that I want to talk about today is from Deggy G. And hopefully hopefully production me will remember to show this in the video version of this. Unfortunately for all of y'all podcast people who aren't watching the actual video itself on YouTube, you will just get your normal screen as normal. I'm sorry. But I'll read out the comment regardless. They said, since we're talking about where and what darkness could possibly be doing, what's your opinion on the 7 strongest of the darknesses? Do you believe that they're already in the Master and the Foretellers? Or do you think that their recompleted forms will be their vessels? I only ask due to the thought of how these characters, quote, died in the Union Cross Keyblade War. So if they were already there, wouldn't that mean that the darknesses were already destroyed? I was really hoping Missing Link would be the game that showed us what it's like to see a pure darkness and its vessel being destroyed, so that we could be prepared for the future, because since Venetius is still inside Ventus, one of our heroes is going to be the target of the Master's plan come to fruition. I responded to him saying, that's such an interesting question, probably worthy of a video in and of itself. It's the podcast. But I could make this into one and then come back and tag him. And then they responded with, the way for Kingdom Hearts is tearing me apart. I was truly relying on Missing Link to bridge us over to Kingdom Hearts 4 perfectly, but now that Missing Link is no longer canon, Kingdom Hearts 4 is going to have to answer more questions. But it's been killing me to figure out / understand where the darknesses all are. I really wanted Missing Link to set up how many darknesses there would be going into Kingdom Hearts 4. If they were inside of them during the time of Union Cross, then I imagine that at least 5 of the 7 would already be destroyed, bar Lucio and the Master. 4 are sealed away in data, 1 is Venetius, and 1 is nowhere to be found. That's the hard part about this idea. If they were already inside Era and the others, then we've already lost some of the most powerful figures in the story, meaning that their recompletion would be the contingency plan that the Master spoke of. But then again, if they haven't been placed inside the Foretellers during the time of Union Cross, then they will be sometime in the past, the epilogue. So sometime past the epilogue of Kingdom Hearts 3, But Ava is missing, meaning that one of the strongest of the seven would need a replacement among the Master's ranks, which leads me to believe that the replacement is going to be Strelitzia, meaning that Ventus won't be the only light-aligned character to be kept safe, but that would still leave the one that spoke with Maleficent and Luxu not having a host at all. You're right, there's just so much to think about. Whew! So, I'm going to do what I always do first. We're going to go through the character files. We're going to see what exactly everybody says about their specific entries. And then we'll move into dissecting what is like a huge comment and a huge think piece. So let's do that first. So we're going to start with the Daybreak Town entry, and we're going to leave the Daybreak Town story until last so that we can go through each of them, each respectively, because I feel like that probably makes the most sense. We'll go through what happened in back cover and Game Central Station so that we have a foundation for going through this, because I think that's where a lot of the crux of this argument is going to fall on. The fact that we don't really have a clear picture at all as to what's going to wind up being true. And we need that foundation in order to be able not just to address this, but to be able to move forward. So, Daybreak Town, a town governed by the Master of Masters and his apprentices, and symbolized by a large clock tower. BC, so back cover. The apprentices gather comrades to form unions in which many Keyblade wielders assemble. The Master of Masters, a man of many mysteries who has 6 Keyblade Masters as apprentices. He sees the future with the events in his gazing eye that he writes about in the books of prophecy, and then after giving copies of the books to his apprentices, he vanishes. His apprentices call him Master. Charity. Creatures known as spirits that the Master of Master created. They accompany the Keyblade wielders, but when a heart of a wielder is tainted by darkness, the charity also turns dark and becomes a nightmare that gives bad dreams to other people. Ira. A man wearing a unicorn mask. Ira is one of the Foretellers and leads the union. He leads the Unicorn Union. Because he's serious and reliable, the Master gives him a role of leading the Foretellers. Envy. A woman wearing a snake mask. Envy is one of the Foretellers and leads the... Why do words have to be so hard? Angus? Anguis Union? People admire her for her integrity, and the Master gives her the role of observing the other 4 Foretellers. Aced, a man wearing a bear mask. Aced is one of the Foretellers, and he leads the Earth Union. He's hot-blooded and sometimes clashes with the other Foretellers. Because of his bravery, he's given the role of supporting Ira. Ava, the woman wearing the fox mask. She is one of the Foretellers and leads the Vulpes Union. Task given to her by the Master of Masters is to gather Keyblade wielders with potential and send them to other worlds. Gula, the man wearing a leopard's mask. Gula is one of the Foretellers and leads the Leopards Union. Well, Leopardus Union. The Master gives him a lost page from the Book of Prophecies and tells him his mission is to solve that mystery. Luxu, one of the 6 apprentices. The Master gives Luxu the task of witnessing the future with his own eyes and trusts him not with the Book of Prophecies, but with a Keyblade that has the Master's eye and a black box. Then Lucio departs. What does the Master entrust with Lucio? Lucio receives from the Master an unnamed Keyblade and with one of the Master's eyes embedded in it and a large black box. The contents of the box, which the Master says should never be opened, are not revealed, and only he and Lucio knows what's in it. Lucio later changes his name and appearance and succeeds in reuniting with the other Foretellers, except Ava. Brackets 3. So in reference to Kingdom Hearts 3. So... Ephemer. A young Keyblade wielder with unruly white hair and a red scarf, Ephemer is cheerful and converses freely with Ava. He helps Sora in a critical situation. Scold, a young Keyblade user with black hair. Like Ephemer, Scold serves as one of the union leaders of the Dandelions. She has a serious nature and she's said to be similar to Ava. Brain. Brain wears a hat and is one of the union leaders of the Dandelions. He says that he will be the virus that overrides the destiny of this world, which is on a path to destruction. Ventus. This is Ventus from a long time before he trained with Aqua and Terra. His hair is a little shorter. He's envious of people with friends because he's always been on his own. That's a... Does that not strike everybody else as being a weird thing to say? See Ventus's section in chapter 1. That's a weird thing to say. Isn't that a weird thing to say? I don't recall at any point during Union Cross that Ven ever showed tendencies of jealousy. And certainly not towards Strelitzia, considering Strelitzia spent most of her time trying to talk to the player character and failing. Speaking of Strelitzia, Luarium's younger sister. After hearing about the Keyblade War from Ava, Strelitzia is appointed as the union leader of the Dandelions, but someone attacks her and she disappears. Elrina. A person with a connection to Larxene. Since Elrina has interacted with Strelitzia a few times, Luarium asks her about his sister. See Luarium. Okay, let's go into what the character files say specifically about Union Cross. So this will be the official recap that's in Kingdom Hearts. That's in the character files. So if stuff's missing, it'll kind of become clear enough to us what specifically they feel is important and isn't important. After the Master of Masters, referred to as the Master from now on, summons his apprentice Lucio to his room, he gives the man an important role in a light-hearted tone. His tasks will be the catalyst for everything to come. After reading the Book of Prophecies given to him, Ira suggests a way to save all the people in the world as a guardian of light. The Master appoints Ira as the leader of the apprentices and answers, "Alright, good luck." In accordance with what the Master has taught them, Ira and the others gather comrades and form unions. However, when they find a dark charity, the existence of a traitor is revealed. And he's given the role of observing the other apprentices and with impartiality and calmly mediating disputes that may arise after the Master disappears. Although she's confused, she accepts it. Azed seems displeased with his role to support Ira, the appointed leader. The Master explains the importance of this role and tells him to step up as a leader himself when the need arrives. The Master gives Gula a piece of the Book of Prophecies that the other apprentices don't know about. When he reads this page, which mentions a traitor, Gula understands precisely what his role is and what the Master's plan is. Bula is tired of trying to decipher the lost page, and he decides he's going to summon Kingdom Hearts to get the master to come back. He asks for Ava's help, but she won't agree. Ava is concerned about the last page of the Book of Prophecies, and the master gives her a mission that has hope of keeping from light expiring. The mission is to have the finest Keyblade wielders depart from this world. Those wielders are dubbed the Dandelions. When the protagonist alights in Daybreak Town, Charity appears to guide, but it disappears after a long monologue about this world and the mission that the protagonist has been given. One day, the protagonist helps a boy who's fighting a powerful enemy. The boy introduces himself as Ephemer and gives his own point of view about looks that everybody's collecting. The protagonist doesn't understand, but decides to help him. As the protagonist is searching for Ephemer, who doesn't show up in the promised location, they encounter Master Ava. Smiling, she assumes a stance with her Keyblades and challenges the protagonist to a battle to test their strength. The charity that has been tainted by darkness and turned into a nightmare appears. It talks about its own idea that light and dark are two halves of the same coin. One can't exist without the other, and says people who can accept darkness can become strong. Ava plans to ask Lucio about the master's whereabouts. However, hearing about Lucio's role and the fact that he's carrying a secret, Ava wonders if he's the traitor. Ava's wish is in vain. The Keyblade War begins. After a series of desperate struggles, the protagonist lies on the ground, their body battered. Light appears, along with Skuld and Ephemer. Before the Keyblade War, one of the Union leaders of the Dandelion Strelitzia is looking for a certain person when someone attacks her and she disappears. As he searches for his sister who vanishes, Lorium talks to Elrina. Apparently, Strelitzia was meant to save someone whose name she doesn't even know from a war. Before they both disappear, the Master tells Lucio that the Keyblade War is still being waged even now. He also says that there could be a truce and that he wants to kick back for a while. Since strange things are happening in Daybreak Town, Brain guesses that this place, which they thought was real, is a data world. That there's someone behind all the weirdness. Maleficent visits Daybreak Town in order to return to her own world. A voice from the darkness says Maleficent returns to the future. She'll be a waypoint for inhabitants of this world. The world of Kingdom Hearts X Key. Daybreak Town debuted in the browser game Kingdom Hearts Key X. Although service for the game has been discontinued, the story of the Keyblade wielders has been carried over into the app version, Kingdom Hearts Unchained Key, and then UX. So even those who haven't played it can experience for themselves the world of Kingdom Hearts Key in UX. I mean, that didn't age well, considering that got discontinued too. Okay. I'm not going to bother reading the Game Central Station thing because there's actually not that much in it. It's just the events of Game Central Station. So interestingly, there's nothing in the official character files about the fact that the Master was prepping the OG Foretellers as vessels for darkness. That's not a thing anymore in the canon. Interesting. I was thinking that there might be. Let me have a quick look and see if there's anything specific about darkness. No. Nothing even in the appendices about darkness. Okay. Interesting. I was kind of anticipating that there might be. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, let's read the Daybreak Town story. It's called You and Your Keyblade Story. I don't know if that's just a typo. That story's in there twice. The first time I met you was in front of the fountain in this town. You woke up immediately, ended up fighting with your Keyblade. I watched the whole thing with one of the Foretellers. My name is Chirafi. I'm a spirit and you're familiar. Your pursuit of light made you the perfect candidate for a Keyblade wielder. I think you looked a little confused as you listened to my explanation. Boy, that takes me back. After that, you went to all sorts of worlds and collected light with your friends. It was our mission to get rid of darkness, collect light, lux, and save the world. For that purpose, Keyblade wielders were divided into 5 unions, and each union would collect lux. And the leaders of the 5 unions were the Foretellers. We went to a lot of worlds together, huh? And we met and helped all kinds of people in those worlds. But the atmosphere in Daybreak Town was changing, little by little, and the Keyblade wielders consumed by darkness began to appear. Every single Chirithi is linked to a Keyblade wielder, and I knew the version of me that disappeared in front of me. Back then you had a dream, right? In the dream, the 5 foretellers had gathered. You met Ephemer the day after having that dream. He told you something. The worlds we visit, the worlds of fairy tales, are nothing more than holograms, projections. The light we collect there is actually this world's light. You tilted your head to the side, confused by what Ephemer said. That was only natural. Even I didn't really understand what he was talking about. But it's true that I just had a slight inkling of it. Because I knew that you had that dream. I gathered information trying to figure out how the whole thing works. My hunch is that the books of prophecies held by the Foretellers is what's creating these holograms. After thinking a little, you told Ephemer about your dream of the Foretellers. Let's head to the place you saw in your dream. After the 2 of you left, another me appeared in front of me. I spoke to me. You're not the same colour that you were before. The other me was dyed a darker colour. For some reason, it filled me with uneasiness. In the end, you 2 weren't able to get to the Foretellers. We know how to get in now. Let's save the rest for another day. You nodded in response. We may not be in the same game, but we're friends, right? Let's meet tomorrow at Fountain Square. How about noon? You and he shook hands. That night, you were all smiles as you sat on your bed, and you told me about Ephemer. Since you looked happy, it made me happy too. You made a friend? That's great. No wonder you're smiling. I hear having friends is nice, but I wouldn't know because I don't have any. When I said that, you looked a little distressed, and then you pointed to yourself. Huh? You? You nodded. I felt a little shy. I never thought a familiar like me could make friends with anybody. You're my friend? It made me happy that you thought of me as your friend. The next day, you waited and waited, but Ephemer never came to Fountain Square. You looked really sad. A friend always keeps their promises. Maybe he had an emergency. You could give him the benefit of the doubt. Despite me telling you this, you didn't seem to cheer up at all. Don't be sad. When you're sad, it makes me sad too. After all, we're friends, right? I stretched out my hand and took yours. And then you hugged me tight. But the atmosphere in the town kept getting worse. Lots of things happened around you. And then you met Scold, a friend of Ephemer's just like you. It's not a competition, or at least it shouldn't be. Our goal of protecting light is the same. There's no need for us to fight, Skull said. As you and Skull searched for Ephemer, you learned about a plan to send Keyblade wielders to a new world. The group made up of these Keyblade wielders, called Dandelions, was created by Master Ava. The purpose of this plan was to survive the end of the world, but you chose not to join the darkness. Yes, that's the kind of person you were. I knew that. And then the end of the world, the Keyblade War began. You battled the Foretellers and collapsed. Before long, Ephemer and Scold came to you. Let's go. Ephemer held out his hand to you as you lay on the ground. Your world was engulfed by light and you fell asleep. When you woke up, what kind of world you'll be in is up to you. So that doesn't really tell us a huge chunk. It just kind of recaps the player's journey, I guess, throughout Union Cross. My concern here is that lack of information about the darknesses and how that is seemingly retconned or at the very least not explained. Because the character files is still treating their existences as still being just they are normal people, not they are people who are now embodying specific parts of light or darkness within them. I think I'm not 100% sure. Right? I would be the first one to say that I don't know because I don't remember off the top of my head. And it would require more research than me just doing this podcast and chatting away, right? But do we ever see the Foretellers fall? Like, do we actually ever see their specific characters fall in the Keyblade Wars? I know we fight them, but I'm not sure at all if we actually um ever see their respective union leaders fall. And if we have never seen them fall, then we can't really assume that um we can't ever really assume that they were taken up by darkness or that they have darkness lurking inside of them, for want of a better term. So it's hard to say. And it'll certainly be hard for me to pinpoint where exactly or who exactly is the strongest of the darknesses. Because if we are going along the lines of they are the seven deadly sins, and we also know that various darkness escaped because there were still arcs left before Skuld and Ephemera escaped in 358. And we also know that Lushu Brain, there was a lot of body hopping, or at least an arrangement, an agreement that happened there. But we don't necessarily know if there's a correlation between the fact that the names of the original Foretellers map closely to the seven deadly sins, right? So we don't know if that's the tell. You know what I mean? That those will be what their corresponding darknesses are going to be relational to. And therefore, who ends up being the strongest of that. That'd be kind of like asking, in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, who's the strongest of the homunculus? Because they all tie in to each other, or the Seven Deadly Sins anime. While it's very clear that Van and Meliodas are strong in their own specific rights, Escanor, we could really say, is probably the strongest out of the Seven Deadly Sins as soon as it hits noon. So it's going to always depend. And we haven't, the thing is, we haven't, had a lot of time with the Darknesses to learn what their motivations are for doing what they're doing. We also don't know why on earth the Master would train up apprentices to a point of masterhood for them to become what is essentially vessels for these Darknesses. Like, what happens after that? What happens after you've made them into vessels, or made them have? Is it a case of keeping them contained? Is it so they can be grateful to you and they can now do your bidding? What's the point? And also, more importantly, what's the point in them needing the specific vessels of the Foretellers when the Master would already know that there is a way of getting regular vessels that don't require going to such extremes as to possess someone else's body by the time we've gotten to 3. In fact, it's interesting to me, in retrospect, when we think of the fact that Xehanort needed to, in many ways, possess Terra's body, when we've already seen a future where that exists, and he certainly wouldn't have needed a body or a vessel when the 2.0 vessels already exist. And that was in Chain of Memories. Like, that was only 10 or so years after Birth by Sleep, where he was perfectly aware of the events in that time. So why on earth would you need to take Terra's body if you already know in 10 years' time the technology for developing vessels that didn't possess souls to begin with already exist? But maybe that's a different conversation for another day. Maybe that's not a now conversation. So it will depend. My brain is always going to lean on the fact that Ava is going to end up being the strongest, because that tends to be how these things go. She is wearing a Tanuki mask, or at the very least a fox mask. Symbolistically, we know of the importance of Tanukis and foxes in terms of Japanese folklore and Japanese storytelling. We know that they are very important themes. Her ability to also identify, gather, and then distribute Foretellers is also very eye-opening and very important in terms of, like, her power is going to end up being influence, right? Because it only really survives because of her influence. Ased and Ira were already going to be at each other's throats regardless. The war was going to happen irrespective, just because those two were at loggerheads with each other to begin with. The fact that Gula couldn't work it out and wanted to summon Kingdom Hearts to bring the Master back, while there is a certain amount of logic to that, was also going to start a war. And Envy more than likely couldn't do anything to prevent any of those things from happening by herself because her role was not to interfere. So in many ways, it was set up in such a way that nothing but the current event could happen unless Envy was to go herself and move against the Master's wishes. The same way that if Gula decided that, you know, they were just going to be smart about it, I guess, and maybe not threaten to open Kingdom Hearts just because somebody else went missing. So the only one that I can see having an approximate value here is Ava. I don't really see, in terms of the other Keyblade masters in that group, how necessarily their equivalent darknesses are going to form to be something that can be contested. I'm in two minds about Lucio and his power, but it's going to tread into the domain of what is a Keyblade wielder without a Keyblade. And it touches upon something that I think is video that I've already done about what is a Keyblade. But it's interesting, but it dabbles into what I've mentioned before about Keyblades and this notion of abandoning, of a Keyblade abandoning someone, and how it can't live in two places at any given time if it's not metaphysical object. And I can't help but feel here that Lucio is suffering from the same fate here. It's hard to judge Lucio in terms of his ability to fight when we do not know really what that looks like because we've never seen him with a Keyblade. And the more you sit back and kind of think about it, the more you can kind of be like, okay, well, why not? As much as he was bequeathed the Master of Masters Keyblade, we have seen plenty of instances throughout the series of Keyblade wielders having more than one Keyblade. Right? Why exactly was Lucio Keybladeless for so long? Sure, it might have given some identity of that, that there's something else going on with this particular person, but we already kind of knew he was sus from the jump, right? Like, I don't think that there's anything wild or weird about the fact that Zigbar has always been Ziggy. Him having a Keyblade would have just kind of added to the fact that something's weird here. Maybe was he trying to not activate other people within Organization 13 who potentially could also have a Keyblade, like Scene, for example. Marluxia, for example. It also would have eroded the point of potentially KH2 and 358 if Zigbar had a Keyblade. But not using a Keyblade and not having access to a Keyblade are two different things. And I think we've always just assumed that Lucio has never had the option to have a Keyblade, when maybe it's probably more accurate to think that Lucio just never used it. used whatever one he had before being bequeathed. And we've defeated Luciu so many times at this point that I'm curious as to what that means in terms of his effectiveness as a force of darkness going forward. Like, are we going to be able to really be able to distinguish Luciu from Zigbar? Are we then going to be able to infer or not that he has some inherent darkness within him? Are we going to take him as a threat seriously? Because ultimately we will have to take all of these strongest darknesses seriously. So do I believe that they're already in the Master and Foretellers? I don't know. I think what will wind up happening in 4 specifically is where we see the first step of the Master's plan playing out, and each of the apprentices succumbing to the specific darknesses or being the properly prepped vessels. The only reason why I don't think necessarily that they are already is because while they're all wearing masks and eyes are the biggest tell for whether or not somebody has been hijacked by darkness or Norted in either capacity, we can't tell specifically from the masks, but there has always been other physical tells. And I'm curious that in that final cutscene, we don't really get any of those tells specifically. Could it be a joint custody thing? Could the fact that Zigbar's, you know, eye patch that he's always had, that he does the reveal that he did in Birth by Sleep, or was it Birth by Sleep, or was it 2? Where he was just like, oh, well, I'm already part Xehanort. And it's just revealed that he's already had the darkness integrated within him, and it's just some sort of Cassidy from FNAF situation where it's joint custody and Golden Freddy, right? It could be that. We don't really know. We're also quick to assume here that the Foretellers are human. And we don't know what the effects of somebody dying in this world are to things that aren't human or don't play by the same laws or the same rules. You'll notice that when I talked about the entry for Daybreak Town in the character files, you'll note that there was no description of it being in either the realm of light, realm of darkness, or anywhere in between. And that's the first indicator to me, personally, that Daybreak Town was happening in another place, specifically. Now, while we do know in the more modern sense that Scala was built on the grounds of Daybreak Town, let me see, one sec. If Scala itself is said to be in the realm of light, or were they smart and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because they could be smart and not mention anything. No, it does not. The only entry for Scala is a beautiful place where Keyblade builders once gathered. The name, meaning stairway to heaven, implies its numerous pure white buildings are layered on top of each other, reaching towards the heavens. So there is no descriptor as to whether or not where specifically in the universe Daybreak Town and Scala are. We do know Mickey is sent there at the end of Melody of Memory. 3, Melody of Memory? Maybe 3, maybe Melody of Memory. Probably Melody of Memory. So it is reachable through our known confines of the universe. However, we don't know whether or not what we experienced going through Xehanort's portal when he attempted to open Kingdom Hearts 3 and then the fight happening in Scala was the real Scala or a manifestation from Xehanort. So whether or not Scala itself is still populated, whether it exists at all, is another thing in and of itself, I feel. I think we were all hoping that Missing Link would, in some ways, fill in the gaps for us leading into things, you know? And I'm like, I share your disappointment, I really do, that we need some sort of foundation to recontextualize this, because we're all walking into this understanding different things. And that is to the detriment of the series. There's no doubt, there's no question about that. Because how can you walk into what is going to be the next saga of this franchise and going, oh, well, I didn't drag myself through Union Cross when it was all available. And then you read the character files and it mentions nothing about it. Like, absolutely nothing. And as I've previously stated and will continue to reiterate, in terms of like our most up-to-date source of Kingdom Hearts, in terms of what is the, what is our primary document here for what we know that isn't just interpretation, the character files is our most up-to-date source. And if that's even leaving out core details like the end of Union Cross, then I fear that the attempt here is to rewrite what was previously told about it. It did leave in specific things, like that it was darkness that allowed Maleficent to be an anchor point to have people to go back, and that it was darkness that facilitated that. So they're not nuking the idea entirely, but they have certainly nuked the idea of what the darkness was being prepped for. Which is really quite sad, honestly. Because there's plenty of things in that we're not especially aware of either. Like, we have the whole Luxford, Demix, Merlucia, Larxene thing, and how they are all tied to ancient Keyblade wielders. Is that to mean that, you know, is that to mean that who we were talking about in terms of their nobodies, is that correlational to either their Foretellers forms, and when they passed through, they were separated from their darknesses? Is that what we're to understand from that? And if so, where are their pureblood heart, darkness forms? Do they not get one because they've released what is essentially released them when they used the arc? We don't know. There's so many questions. And I'm curious how they'll tie that up in a way that's satisfactory. But it certainly leaves us with far more questions than answers. This has been Thinking Through the Darkness, a Lore by Spec production with me, Spec. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today. Just as a reminder, don't forget, if you haven't followed the Lore by Spec YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe. It's free there. If you haven't taken the time to review the podcast or dropped a like and a comment, those really help too. And if you ever feel inclined to help me keep the lights on over here, head to Ko-Fi, which is in my description, to help support the podcast. Once again, thank you all so very much for listening, and I will see you all next time.